To this, another episode of A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is where we break down and discuss episodes of TV shows that you may not have even heard of. I believe these TV shows need a little more love, and that is what this platform is here to do. Each week we will be covering different shows from all over the globe. We'll be breaking down each episode, giving you the main highlights, and going through it bit by bit. But for now, I think it's best that we find out what's on the menu today. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 3 of season 8, and we are going back into Clarice. We're getting back with our favourite FBI agent. And honestly, I'm so glad to be covering this show. It seems like every episode is totally different from the last. So obviously in the first episode, we found that we had some sort of serial killer. In the second episode, we're dealing with a cult. In the third episode, we are dealing with an interrogation. And in the fourth episode, we end up dealing with an internal investigation. So it's not following any sort of linear pattern, but you can see where the actual pattern is. It makes sense after what happened in the third episode that the fourth, they would need to be investigated. And so that's what we're going to be dealing with today. But I do find this series very interesting, especially the way that they kind of keep it within that Hannibal, Silence of the Lambs sphere. I know that it ends up differing away from that path because Clarice isn't defined just by Buffalo Bill or Hannibal Lecter. And we start to see that throughout this episode coming up. But as I say, I'm excited to get into it, and I just want to crack through these episodes as quickly as possible and just enjoy them for what they are. So I think it's time to get into it. This is Clarice, Season 1, Episodes 4 to 6. Episode 4, You Can't Rule Me. So picking up from where the last episode ended, we know that a man died while he was in custody, while Krendler and his team, including Clarice, were investigating him. And it was Clarice who was in the room at the time, but we also know that there was traces of some compound on his drink that actually sent him into what looks like a stroke. But he died there and then in the room. And so Krendler wants to investigate this conspiracy theory that they've got right now. Someone is pulling strings outside of where they are, and he needs to find out who it is. However, like I said in the intro, this is going to need to be investigated. And so Internal Affairs comes in and they start looking into what's been going on. They need to make sure that everything is above board, and it means that Krendler's team isn't allowed to go anywhere. They're going to have to stay inside the building and not investigate anything. They're basically on desk duty. And the IA agent that actually comes in to investigate them has a past with Krendler. It would seem that he has always had some sort of rivalry with Krendler, and Krendler rose through the ranks quicker than he did. And he is quite clearly jealous of that fact, that Krendler is now a well-respected, well-known agent, whereas he is IA, which generally, if you are getting internal affairs involved, it ends up being very negative towards internal affairs, even though they are just doing their job. But I guess that kind of thing can grate on you. But while he is there, he is basically telling people that he will help them out if they throw Krendler under the bus and prove that it was his fault that everything happened the way that it happened. He's essentially saying that, especially to Clarice, that he will give her a job in his department. He will help her out in a certain way if she rolls over on Krendler. But Clarice has started to have integrity, and especially when it comes to Krendler, because he's now started to give her the trust that she deserves. And also she has started to integrate herself more into the team and feels now that this is something that she can work with effectively to bring down corruption and bring the real perpetrator of this crime to justice. The guy from IA also brings in Ardelia Mapp. And apologies, I may have said that she was a lawyer in the last episode, but she's not. She's actually part of the FBI. And she's also Clarice's roommate, but also she's a black woman, and that will be important later on in this episode. But the guy from IA makes a real show of it. He wants people to know, especially Clarice, that Ardelia Mapp is going to be investigating the team that she is part of, and especially Krendler. And so after this meeting, Clarice goes and speaks to her and tries to basically bring her on side, telling her things about the team that she shouldn't really need to know because she's going to be investigating anyway. It's like she's trying to bring Ardelia on side. but Ardelia is just trying to keep her integrity. Clarice knows that they need to start doing some investigating into what happened with this guy that they had in custody. But of course, since they're all meant to be desk-bound, they aren't allowed out of the office. One of the team tells them that he will cover for them and that they need to get out of here because they need to do their jobs. They need to make sure that whatever's happened, they've got a handle on it and they know what the best course of action is going forward. And so when they try and go and speak to the reporter who was almost killed in episode 1, they actually find some evidence. They aren't able to speak to her. She's no longer at the job that she was at before, but they actually find some key information. They're actually looking for a doctor called Marilyn Felker, who was actually a doctor at the place where these medical trials were being held. And so now Clarice and the team need to find out where this Marion Felker is, because is she another victim or is she still out in the world? They start to go through the system and try and find out where this woman actually is, but unfortunately there's no luck until Clarice gets a phone call from a woman that basically says, "That's my sister." And so once again Clarice goes out and meets this woman, and it turns out it's not only her sister but her twin sister. So she talks to this woman and finds out that she hasn't heard from her sister in a long time. The sister, Luann, who is actually a nurse, says that her sister Marion was always the more adventurous one, and she is currently jetting off around the world trying to help people, and that Luann has very little contact with her. Clarice and the team end up finding an address for this woman and go over to stake out her place. Once they get there, they end up finding a list of names, which is the names of the women who died, along with the poison that was used on the hitman that they had in custody. And so they believe that this is an open shut case, but for some reason something doesn't feel right to Clarice. As for Ardelia Mapp's investigation of the team, she starts to uncover the fact that Krendler actually changed the records of the logins of people coming in and out of the building so that it looked like he was the one that authorised them, whereas it was Esquivel. But Krendler knew that they were coming after Esquivel to make him a patsy in all this, and he wasn't going to allow that. He knew that if his name was on it, it would be a much bigger deal than if it was just an FBI agent. And he knows what IA is trying to do right now, and he just won't allow it. And so while Mapp investigates and feeds back to IA what knowledge she has of this, a guy comes through to her office. And eventually tries to pit her against Clarice. It seems that Ardelia has been trying to get up the ranks for a long, long time, and now she's got this small opportunity and she's not going to let it lie. But she's just as talented as Clarice is, and he fucking tries to mansplain to her how the system works. And as a black man, he is at a certain level, but he's never going to get above that level unless he does something that doesn't exactly play ball, but does it for the right people. And essentially he's trying to make sure that she throws not only Krendler but Clarice under the bus. However, she's got her integrity and she knows exactly what it feels like to be in the situation that she's in. She knows how hard it's going to be for her to climb that ladder, and she is accepting of that, and she will do it her way. And I just find it a bit of a joke that obviously it is acted, but that any black man can try and speak to a black woman about how hard it is. I'm a white man and I wouldn't fucking dare. Like, I find it ridiculous that men try and speak down to women on this kind of thing. We've got a lot of privilege, and for someone like that just to try and look, I wouldn't tell a black man either how hard it is for me, because it's going to be at least 2 times, 3 times as hard for them. So I wouldn't dare. And I just find that kind of recourse just abhorrent. But I'm going to say, to be fair, this was, I think, set in the 90s. Not that it makes it any better, but I just find it fucking gross. However, after a while, they end up getting a phone call. Krendler looks like he's about to lose his job, but IA get a phone call that actually the man who was in custody died of a stroke. Yes, there were traces of the substance that they believe poisoned him, but it wasn't enough in his system to actually kill him. It was genuinely a stroke, and that is what they are putting down as his cause of death. So IA are pissed off. Krendler is confused because it seems that whoever has made this decision is well above his head. They know exactly what it was. It was this poison, But now they have to prove it, and now it seems that there is someone inside that is fucking with them, and they don't know what to do right now. They don't know who to turn to, and they don't know who to trust apart from themselves within their little group. As for Clarice, she works with her hunches. As she did with Buffalo Bill, she goes over to this hospice where this Luann Felker works. She heads upstairs and starts to talk to her more about the last time she saw her sister and the things that her sister actually did. However, with her being a nurse and being on her own overnight, she heads out to help a patient and Clarice stays in the room. As Clarice starts to walk around the room, she sees a number of people in these beds and then spies a familiar face. And that is the face of the woman that she's just been speaking to. She remembers back to a photo that she saw in that woman's house, in Marilyn's house. And it was of two twin girls, one in a wheelchair and one pushing her. And she realises that something's wrong. As she turns round to try and leave, she gets injected in the neck with something by Luann, or potentially Marilyn, and she falls to the floor. And then we just see, out of blurry eyes, Clarice gently going to sleep. Episode 5, Get Right with God. And so, after being injected, Clarice wakes up and she finds herself in a dire situation. She can't move her legs, and she is basically now a patient in this hospital. She tries calling out to the cleaner, but the cleaner has his headphones on and he can't hear an absolute thing. Eventually he leaves and she's left alone again. But then Marilyn comes in, still obviously pretending to be her sister. But by now Clarice knows exactly who she is. Marilyn threatens Clarice and tells her that she will put her into a chemically induced coma if she doesn't play ball with her. Right now, nobody knows where Clarice actually is. She's gone rogue once again and she's ended up in a bad situation. And it's really bad this time. But for now, all she's going to keep doing is just keep sedating Clarice. And when Clarice wakes up, she'll talk to her about what's been going on. But for now, she is keeping Clarice where she needs her to be. Very much like the other patients that are around Clarice right now. She's in a room full of people and they're all in this similar situation, including Marilyn's sister. Anytime that Clarice is sedated by her, she ends up having these memory lapses, or in this case flashbacks, where she starts to either see visions of her father there in the room with her, or the time when she was actually taken away from her father. And we all know about her past from the film, that she ended up going to this farm out in the countryside, and she remembers hearing the screams of the lambs as they were taken to slaughter. And from there she picked up one of the lambs and she ran away with it. She tried to save it, and it's something that Hannibal uses against her when he's trying to psychoanalyze her. But we see back to what happened after that. We see that actually her father came and picked her up and took her home, and that it seems like to her, her father could do no wrong whatsoever. As for why Marilyn is doing this, she wants to know what the police actually know, or what the FBI know. She can feel the walls closing in around her and she just wants out of this situation now, but it seems that Marilyn is actually working with someone, and she calls them and she tells them that the FBI is on its way. They are investigating this situation and she needs to find a way out. Her and her sister. Obviously we know that her sister's in the bed next to Clarice. But Marilyn also wants to know the location of the reporter that was almost killed in episode 1. And she wants to know what that person has told the FBI. Now obviously we know that the reporter's gone on the run. She's missing in action. She hasn't gone back to her job and she has certainly not been seen around. And the FBI haven't been able to get hold of her either. Clarice by this point has actually got herself a weapon to try and stop Marilyn from doing this. When Marilyn was out of the room, she actually picked something up and has snuck it under her bed or under her sheets. And while Marilyn's talking to her, Clarice starts to see certain aspects of Marilyn's life, and that she knows that at some point Marilyn has had issues in the past where she was the actual one in the wheelchair. And she begins to talk to her about it and why that affected her and her relationship with her sister. All the while she is trying to get Marilyn off guard so that she can strike her with whatever she's got under the sheets. However, at the most vulnerable point, Marilyn realises this is what she's trying to do, and as Clarice strikes at her, she takes the object and ends up injecting Clarice. with something that starts to bring her paralysis, including the fact that she can't breathe. But Marilyn knows that she can't just kill an FBI agent, she has to keep her alive. And so since Clarice's lungs are shutting down, she starts to feed a tube down her throat to make sure that she can keep her alive. And it feels very reminiscent of when Hannibal actually fed the tube into Will's throat to put Abigail Hobbs's ear in there. The sound of it is very, very similar. Obviously, it's a similar procedure, so the sound would be pretty similar. But even the sound design in this episode, it sounds like what we would have got in Hannibal. There's a lot of drumming going on, and it feels very tribal. And that's the sense that I got when I was listening to the Hannibal soundtrack. It's eerie, but it just helps link it back to that series as well. I can't remember if it's in the films whatsoever, but just obviously watching Hannibal recently and now watching this, I can see the similarities between the two, and I think, like I've said before, it would have been good to link the two, and doing it in this way is very clever. Clarice's team turn up for the first time and they can't actually figure out who Marilyn is. They still think that it's her sister Luann, and so they talk to her for a bit, and when they actually go into the room where Clarice is, Clarice at this point is under some heavy drugs, but also she's got wrapping all over her face, and so they can't see who it is underneath. So they don't actually realise who it is. They go back to Marilyn's house to try and find out some information about her. They find a picture that's missing that when they actually look back at the evidence log, they did log it. They did have a picture of it previously, and they realise who it is. That Marilyn had a twin. The twin is actually the one who is at the clinic right now. Maybe Marilyn is the one at the clinic and not Luann. So while they roll out and try and get there, Clarice, at this point, has managed to try to escape. But when she does, she comes across a man who she thought she recognised earlier. She thinks it's her dad. But actually, this man is potentially the man that they've been looking for all along. He strikes her across the face with a phone and sends her back to bed. Eventually, now that she's back in bed, Clarice's team turn up. But just as they arrive, Marilyn takes a massive overdose and dies instantly. They manage to save Clarice and Luann, but obviously Marilyn is dead. So they can't arrest her on any crimes, but they also can't find out who the hell is running this thing. And Clarice is reunited again with Ardelia, who, at the end of the last episode, Ardelia gave Clarice a talking to. She basically told her that it's easier for Clarice, because of who she is, in the industry that she is in, rather than someone like Ardelia. Again, it's the whole black woman situation. She can't get to where Clarice is, even though Clarice is a woman, and still has her own hardships, because she is black. And that's a travesty, because we're missing out on so many talented people just because we judge them on the colour of their skin. It's fucking ridiculous. But we can see that even though Clarice is now safe, she is traumatised by what's been going on. And we're no further forward to actually finding out who has been doing this to them. Episode 6. How does it feel to be so beautiful? Now, after her incident, obviously with Marilyn, the FBI guys need to know that she can go back into the field. But to do that, she's going to have to get a psych eval. They bring in a therapist and she sits down with her, and it turns out that there is obviously a lot still traumatising her. It seems that not only this thing with Marilyn is affecting her, but also Buffalo Bill. All Clarice is trying to do at this point is remember the man's face that she saw before she got hit with the phone. But it's all still a blur, and any time that she tries to focus on this man, he turns into Buffalo Bill. And so, because of this, Crendler tells her that she's going to have to go on leave, because this just isn't good for her, being in the field right now. She really needs to seek help, and she needs to convalesce. But of course, that's not the Clarice way, as we rightly well know. The reason she ended up in this mess is because she goes on her instinct. And so straight away, her first thought is that she needs to get out there and start looking for this person, trying to find a way of actually sorting this out. But the only way she can really do that is to make sure she's still on active duty. And so she goes to see the one person she thinks that can help, the one person she thinks has sway, and that's the Attorney General, Ruth Martin. Ruth, however, has her own agenda. She tells Clarice that she will absolutely do what is necessary to get her back on the team, but she wants something from her. She wants Clarice to come over and have dinner with her and Catherine, her daughter, who was the captive of Buffalo Bill. And because Clarice is so desperate right now, she agrees to that. And so later on that evening, she goes over to the Attorney General's house to have dinner. Catherine, we've seen throughout the episodes, is in a real state. She constantly just stays in her room. It's very rare she even comes out just for dinner. So to have her come out to a dinner table and sit around it and be around people, it's a big deal. She's also been trying constantly to contact Clarice, but Clarice never returns her calls. And so the Attorney General thinks that it would be a good idea for them to sit down together so they can actually talk. It would seem, however, that Clarice actually managed to get hold of some DNA from this guy that was in the hospital at the time, the one who hit her with the phone. And so Ardelia is trying to find out who this person is. She's running it through all the databases, but when she gets the results back, they're inconclusive. But just like Clarice, she is tenacious, and she goes after the results and tries to find out what's going on. She realises that they're actually been faked. But she also managed to get her hands on the sample as well, so maybe at some point in the future they can rerun it. But right now, everything is inconclusive. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know who they're looking for. And also within the group, they don't know who to trust. Like I said before, they are struggling to find out someone who they can actually trust right now. Crendler, however, ends up meeting up with a lawyer. He's in a bad situation with his marriage. We saw it in the last episode, but I didn't speak on it too much, if at all. And he's got 2 kids with his wife. His wife is an alcoholic, and he was previously an alcoholic. But, I mean, you're always an alcoholic, unfortunately. But he has managed to get in the program and do the work and come out the other side. Whereas his wife is still drinking heavily and taking pills. And that's why he's divorcing her. Because he obviously can't be around someone like that. It's not fair on him. But there's kids involved. Fairly young kids. They look like 12 and maybe 13. And so Crendler tells her that he's going to take the kids when they get this divorce. She, however, tells him, not over my dead body. And so he has to try. And so he speaks to a lawyer to try and get this sorted so that he can actually have access to his kids full time, because the mother just isn't budging. Prior to this, however, they were almost in each other's lap, because it seems that there is still a sexual connection between the two of them, but the alcohol obviously plays a massive factor in his decisions. Clarice sees some alarming signs from Catherine, and it's quite worrying how Catherine is acting out in the world, but obviously Clarice can see that she's not right. There's something not right. And as much as the Attorney General is trying to push her daughter back into society, it's not going to help. It's just going to make her go back in on herself. But Catherine also tells Clarice that she's actually managed to track down Buffalo Bill's mother, and that she wants to go and visit her, and that maybe Clarice can come with her. Clarice thinks this is a fucking terrible idea, which sounds like it is. But Catherine is trying some way to find a connection and get back to her old self. But this isn't the way. But Catherine also tells Clarice that she remembers what happened that night. Clarice seems to have blocked out everything that happened. And we never actually saw it at the end of Silence of the Lambs. We just know that he died and that she ended up having a celebration afterwards for it. It's in that celebration where she ends up getting called by Hannibal Lecter. But we don't know the interim. We don't know what happened in between. And this is where the gaps are filled in, because it turns out that Clarice, after shooting Bill, sat there in the dark. And when he asked her, how does it feel to be so beautiful? She shot him again and he died. She then sat in the dark and cried. And she tells Catherine that this didn't happen. I didn't cry when he died. I didn't sit there in the dark and cry, but in fairness, she might have done. I mean, we know that she did, because we end up seeing it at the end of the episode. She has another hypnosis session and she sees it all play out in front of her. But until then, she didn't know. But like I say, she has this hypnosis session, and once she actually gets the image of Buffalo Bill out of her head, she can actually focus further on what she actually saw that day in the hospital. She remembers reaching up for this man, taking his hand and looking him in the face. However, the face was staring back at her. she didn't recognise. But to the audience, we find out that it's actually Paul Crendler's divorce lawyer. And so, going forward, this case just got a hell of a lot more complicated. And so, to sum up what I've just seen and the last 3 episodes and the last 6 episodes, I'm really enjoying this. I think that a lot of it is, well, I think that the show didn't know where it wanted to go with the types of episodes that it had. So each time it ran a different episode, it ran a different storyline. Not storyline, but feel for the show. So like I said before, you had the first episode where it was a hunt. You had the second episode where it was sort of a standoff or a action situation. You had the third one where it was in a locked room and they sat and they talked and they analysed. You had the fourth one where it was about the investigation and trying to find out who was behind all this. You had the sixth one, which was a bit more psychology driven and a bit more of a horror vibe to it. And then you had this final one, which was a bit more psychological thriller. And it's very interesting. Don't get me wrong. I do really like this series for that element. I think it's fascinating because obviously there is a lot to take in at all times. But maybe this is why it didn't do as well as I'd hoped, because it is sort of different every episode. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and knock that, because at the end of the day, I like an anthology series. I like to watch something where everything is different. It's just that this happens to be sort of an anthology series inside what is meant to be just a contemporary series. But I'm not knocking it at all. I think it's really good. And obviously, there is a lot to go at. We're finding out more about Clarice and her situation, and just expanding on that story of her being at that farm, looking after the lambs. Obviously, the issue that she had, the murdering of the lambs, the fact that she does seem to block some things out if they're too traumatic for her. And then we find out that there was more to the whole Buffalo Bill angle, and that it wasn't just a straight up, she shot him, he was dead, that was it. They went and found Catherine Martin and they just escaped. That was not the story, according to Catherine. And now, according to Clarice, she's remembered more. So I just like the fact that it does pan back to that and take us back down that whole rabbit hole. It's really, really good. Really, really dramatic and keeps you on your toes. And I like that. I do like that about this series. It's absolutely worth having back to go over again on this podcast because it's fantastic. I've enjoyed every bit of it. I can't remember what happens. I really can't. Things are sort of coming back to me a little bit, but I'm not sure if I'm intermingling them with other shows. So I don't want to get ahead of myself and start thinking, oh yeah, that happens. But yeah, it's fantastic so far. And if you haven't watched it, go and watch it. If you like Silence of the Lambs or Hannibal or anything like that, go watch this because it's really good. And like I say, some of the sound design is basically pulled from Hannibal, it feels. I don't know if they got the same sound team in or what, but it sounds pretty much the same. And that really helps with the atmosphere because it brings you back into that world. But anyway, I'm done for today. Like I've said, I've linked the 2 books in my link tree if you want to go check them out. They're on general sale now, so go and enjoy them. They're really good. As for next week, we're going to be coming back to Inside Number 9, which I can't wait for. I'm really looking forward to doing those episodes again. As I said with the last episode, it was fucking great to revisit those characters and that world. But as for today, I'm done. So, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for being here. Anyone who subscribes to the Patreon, thank you very much for doing that as well. But until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. And that is it for now, amigos. And yes, I am as angry as you are at me for that sentence, but I hope you enjoyed the show and had some fun along the way. It means a lot that you are listening and supporting me. This is an independent podcast after all, and doesn't get a lot of backing, so it is great to know that you're out there, you're listening. And if you want to come talk to me on any of the platforms I'm on, just come say hi. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I'm even a little bit on TikTok. I don't post that much, but I'm on there. And you can also drop comments in the comment sections on any of the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts from. But as always, thank you for your time, and I will speak to you soon.